Hey Erica, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. How are you?
I'm very, very good, thanks. I think having you on the podcast now is very, very fitting because I'm off to Sweden tomorrow and just for like a short break, a short holiday. And it's really good to have you on because like that's your area of expertise. You're like all of your startups all about travel. It's all about holidays and stuff like that.
Yes, it definitely is. And I actually be going to Iceland in a while. So we're all going up north in the next couple of days. So amazing.
Yeah, I think there's so much stuff to jump into in this episode. Like before we hit record, we were like talking about so many different things. So I really just want to jump in. So I guess like what is WeRoad for people that don't know?
Well, actually, WeWorld is a new way to travel together, like in small groups, and explore the world with like-minded individuals. At the end of the day, we're first and foremost a travel community of passionate travelers, and what we try to do with WeWorld is literally bringing people together, enabling them to live the best experiences in their lives in all destinations around the world. Right now, we are, I think, at more or less 100 destinations. And yes, and the amazing bit is that you can actually travel with WeRoad all over Europe. So we have Italian rerouters, we have Spanish rerouters, and we have UK-based rerouters that actually are amazing because we have more than 16 different nationalities traveling together. Like, and this
Mm.
is like mind blowing to me. When I all started the business, I couldn't even imagine it would have gone so large. Let's say in scale. That's amazing, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, it's absolutely incredible. And I think how like I guess how did you actually start the process? Because it's a very interesting story, and I think I do really want to talk about how you're different, and I think like also how you got to that stage of like how you were different. So I guess like firstly, um, like how did it start?
Well, I actually started in 2017. That seems ages ago to me right now, because me and my founders or are like millennials, this amazing generation, I would say, and we had the need of like traveling with friends, but our friends didn't match our holidays, our habits, or our travel style, right? So we wanted to look for travel individuals and like-minded ones that could literally join the experience with us, and it was so tough to do that. And what my other co-founders actually did was like trying to look for operators, companies that did exactly this, not in Italy where we are all originally from, but abroad. And it tested out like some of our actual also competitors, but I wouldn't say the name, by the way. And what they realized was that probably the groups they traveled with were a little bit too big or too wide to literally get to know the people they were traveling with, or the age range was too diverse to enable them to literally establish our connections after the trip, right? Because at the end of the day, we are all on the lookout of new friends. We want to fight loneliness with our business, right? So basically, that was something that was missing in their travel experiences at the time. Another thing was like travel styles. Everybody has had their own travel mood, travel approach, and this was a little bit like of a problem during the trip, right? Because making everybody happy during a trip is like the biggest challenge ever. So
Mm.
when they came back from these trips, they literally said, okay, let's try and create our own way of traveling for millennials. And we came up with like WeRoad, right? So the whole concept relies around like small groups from 8 to 15 people max, so that you can literally talk to at least 5 minutes a day with each person in the trip, right? And more or less the same age range, right? So between 25 and 35 and 35 and 45 years old. So that obviously you also are in the same period of your life, and you can also share challenges, issues, or also positive bits about your life at the same time during your trip. And last but
Mm.
not least, we wanted this trip to be unique. Every trip with WeRoad is different than the other, and this is enabled by our travel coordinators. So you don't get a very touristy experience by traveling with us, and that's the whole concept around the WeRoad experience.
Mm.
But we have this travel coordinators literally enabling us to leave the best experience for the group at the same time. and it could actually be me and you like touring a group around the world. So also this, I think it's very different from what happens in a normal travel company, let's say.
Mm. What I would love to jump into, Erica, and you articulated it so well, is that so when you started, it was a very interesting process that you just mentioned there. How I guess the traditional travel agents exist, and they book holidays or whatever for. I mean, even some of them do for groups, as you just mentioned. But what you're doing differently is that you were focusing more on the actual group dynamics as well as like the friendships within that group of like, because that wasn't really focused on before with group bookings. It was more focused around like how many people can we just sell for this one thing. It was more of a, do we have a critical mass to make profit on this? And
Yes,
it's a very
yes,
interesting
exactly.
thing, and I would really much compare it to like a blue ocean strategy where you've got like different preferences of the people that weren't
Hmm.
kind of being met, and like there was oversaturation in that traditional sort of like travel agents, I guess, but they were all kind of focusing around the same customers, same consumers. Whereas you were coming in a very fresh angle with the millennials focusing just on the group dynamics and also the experience, which is kind of like wasn't being hit before. That's a very interesting angle that you were taking there. How did you actually like practically start it though? How did you test it out?
Yeah, well, actually, I think that group dynamics are as important as tour management itself. So, as
Mm,
you rightfully said, everybody was like focused on group traveling to maximize like money, basically, and the
yeah,
outcome
yeah.
of like traveling. Like, so it was a cheaper way to travel since the very, very first day. What we understood with WeRoad is that actually traveling in group is what makes the travel worth a lifetime experience, and that's actually in our mission, that of creating and designing like experiences that literally change people's lives. So uh, the way in which we pulled it through was based on our expertise as entrepreneurs as well. So Paolo, Michael, the founder of WeRoad, and Fabio and I all are very, very much focused on community and the experience itself. And we think that experiences are transformative by design. So what we try to do when designing an experience, a trip for example, is not thinking it in a way that is like, okay, this is an amazing trip that can be operated xyz times, but rather
Mm,
which is the emotional curve that every person just goes through during this trip. So I'll give you a very concrete example of it. So at the very first moment, in the very first moments of the trip, what we try to do is like do bonding activities or do like tough transfers, because at the end of the day people during transfer get to know each other. They have time to spend sitting one next to the other talking about their lives. So at the very, very first, in the very first moments of this kind of experiences, it's fundamental to break the ice, get to know the other people, and not just feeling like, oh my god, what do we do right now? I want to do this, that person wants to do that. Oh, how can we cope with it? Like, oh my god, we're gonna like divide the group since day one. This is bad, right? So what we try to do with our design, with our product, with our experience design, is literally not making this happen, but rather the opposite. So enabling
mm,
the experiences that we put together to become like the perfect in that particular moment. And also we train our travel coordinators to understand that and be the, I always say, the directors of the orchestra somehow, right? So, or the director of the
mm,
experience, so that they can roll it out in the best way possible. So testing it out, it's intense, it's tough, but at the same time it's the best bit of our job, right? So going on travels, and the coolest bit about it is that our travel coordinators at the end of the day are our first and foremost ambassadors, and they're on the ground every day. So every day we have tons of trips on, and we
mm.
can have them also test out and keep on constantly improving our experience. And we got our feedbacks and all this like super, super consolidated things.
Mm. But it seems like the business model is quite difficult to. I guess that there's so many different players at play that you need to focus on keeping them happy. So there's obviously the travel coordinators you were saying within the different destinations. That's a difficult thing to manage in itself because they're across different geographies, different locations, and like you have to also ensure that they withhold a certain quality, right? That's quite difficult. And then also obviously it's attracting like it's attracting the customers, it's attracting that group, but it's also matching them together based on preferences and based on ages and stuff like that that you were mentioning. I mean, for me as an outsider, it seems like an incredibly difficult business model to grow, and you have to have
Well,
obviously hit
actually,
that critical mass to make it profitable per trip.
yeah, yes. Actually, I mean, tour operating is very old as a concept, let's say. So the whole operational side of package holidays, of putting like services together, said it brutally, let's say, if I want to say it brutally, it's a competence that we can actually buy from the market. It's very, very much consolidated. What is new here is the management of what normally are referred to as tour guides, right? So we don't call them tour guides. We don't consider them tour guides, but rather as travel buddies. And so we invest more than any other tour operator in selection, training, onboarding, engagement of these travel coordinators, and that is the key
Mm,
to scalability. Because at the end of the day, those people enable us to scale our product quality, scale our experience quality. So we literally don't lose a single feedback that could be lost if scaling multiple countries, because we have our ambassadors there, and this is something that nobody can tell basically. Then they enable us to have local spontaneous ambassadors. Imagine like most businesses like setting up marketing strategies to develop referral programs, ambassador programs. How do I keep them engaged? We have already done it through the travel coordinator community, because at the end of the day we invested in training, selecting them, which basically means getting them to know the brand at heart and making them feel part of the brand, part of the company, part of the community first and foremost. So we talk about brand, they talk about community. It's their real reason for being, that of being connected with new cool travel coordinators and people, right? So these I think are the keys to scalability. And then the last probably bit is that thanks to our focus on social media assets that are at the end of the day the major channel of communication of our generation, we are like literally always present in people's life, not just when they travel with us, but we literally
mm,
become their buddy in with a meme, with we're very ironic, by the way. So with the ironic memes that have probably nothing to do with, I don't know, what you can do in day three in Vietnam, but at the same
yeah,
time
yeah.
you're there like joking around something that has happened in people's life, and we're present, and we can maximize the impact that we have on our community, cutting down conversion costs, then cutting down like all other, you know, side aspects of rolling out a marketing strategy that in different markets. But yes, at the same time, what I always say is like we create value with this, because every penny we invest in marketing, it goes directly into the growth of our community. And this actually also
Mm.
paid off during COVID, for example, because we became a media brand. And we had like also we were able to monetize out of our marketing reach at the end of the day. So this also became a new stream of revenue.
That's very, very interesting. I would love to talk about how you actually find your customers, because we talked about the, I guess, the side of the experiences. So you're the travel ambassadors, as you mentioned, is like basically they're the supply side. How do you attract your customers? And you mentioned social media. What's been the most kind of powerful stream for you?
Well, actually, it's always been like I would say Instagram, the first and foremost. Right now, TikTok is growing very, very much. We had the All Back Go Facebook groups helping us a lot to keep people engaged in our trips, not just because they're in this Facebook group to find travel mates, but also like to look at other people experiences in a very, very spontaneous and natural way, right? Because it's like a tool that enables them to share their experiences, their pictures, their insights about the destinations in a very common and communal environment, I would say, community style environment, right? So,
Mm.
and we what we try to do is maximize all these assets in a way that they become so strategic and key for the growth of our customers, right? And we combine it with offline events and activations. So at the end of the day, being a community, a local community, because our travelers travel normally with people that live more or less in the same region area, let's say,
Yeah.
also implies that we need to organize a lot of like offline community activations, right? So imagine that right now on a global scale we have around, I would say, 40 events per week, spread all over Europe, and part of them are organized, part of them are spontaneous, and I cannot even tell how many spontaneous local events are right now in this moment taking place because of WeRoad. Because imagine like a group of people that didn't know each other 3 weeks before like the trip, then become best friends,
Mm.
and then they start like organizing like reunions. We have tons of reunions happening all over Europe right now. I lost you.
It's okay. Just carry on.
Okay, so I completely lost you. Sorry.
It's fine. Did you finish speaking, or were you like carry on?
No, no, that's fine.
Okay, let me cut this out. 16:05.
Sorry.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Okay, we'll cut this bit out. Don't worry about it. Okay, but more like I guess practically, how did you approach each customer? So you talked about the obviously the social medias and stuff like that. Before that was a strong platform. Like, how did you approach your first customer groups? Because you obviously didn't have that before.
Yeah. Well, in Italy, for example, Facebook group was key. Was key because millennial targets already spontaneously created tons of Facebook groups. And I'm talking about like 2015, 2017, more or less as years, right? And they were like looking for travel mates because there was nobody in the market proactively using those channels
Mm,
to attract customers, right? You need to imagine that probably in Italy and Spain, so the Southern European market, travel agents weren't a thing for the millennial people, right? So
mm,
there was this big gap between traditional tour operators only relying on travel agents and the need of millennial people to start approaching the group travel like world, not having the right supply
yeah.
chain to attract them, right? So we literally were able to understand where they communicated, right? So where do they look for travel mates? Where do they look for travel inspiration? So we took over with Instagram, the travel inspiration side of things. Okay, we're going to inspire you with travel pictures and peer to peer reviews on the travel destinations. So no longer like a paper catalog of tour operator in the travel agent. No, 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 no. That's Instagram feed, right? So inspire, done. Group. Group actually it's a thing for millennials, right? So the need of relation, the need of like getting to know new people wasn't there before. It was like just cutting cost. For us it's like literally center. So how do you get to know new people? How do we connect people, cultures and stories? That's the way in which we do things. So people looked for people on Facebook groups and we created our own, and instead of leaving it like very spontaneous, we managed it proactively, thus
Mm.
managing it as a sales acquisition channel at the end of the day.
That's
And
interesting. So you made
yeah,
you made your very own like Facebook group to attract people who are looking for this, I
exactly.
guess like different people to travel with, and you would kind of connect them manually.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's very community. It can't be super structured. Let's say it needs to be managed and channeled, right? And I
Mm,
would say also educated. So what you can do with community is give the go, and then have them do the work from themselves. It needs to be spontaneous. So what we did with the Facebook community is that we basically trained them to use the tool. We basically trained them about the format of our trips. We had them experience it firsthand with our trips, and we had other people like witnessing that it was good and amazing and life changing traveling with us. So basically the people that booked with us became spontaneous ambassadors in the community. And
Mm,
when we understood it all worked so well, it was when people were answering on our behalf. So the community was literally ignited, right? So the engagement rate is insane, especially in the most major markets right now. And people understood how the whole community of WeWork works and work around it on their own. Making it super super scalable. And yes, I think this is like the
mm,
key pillar, let's say, around community building.
mm. And like you built the community so effectively that during the pandemic, you didn't lose money. This is the really interesting thing, like because so you started since 2017, 20 when was the pandemic? Like 2019, 2020, like yeah, 2020 wasn't it?
Yes.
So like, but you carried on like with different revenue streams and like in an industry that was like probably hit the hardest in the pandemic. You
Oh yes.
you survived and you're growing now. How did you do that?
Yeah, well, actually, it was intense, challenging, but amazing at the same time. Because I think that during the pandemic, I personally is, and but also I think all the people that worked along with me realized how powerful what we've built was, and how powerful our community were. What happened at the end of the day was that all the people that travel with us and all the travel coordinators belonging to our community reunited together and kept first and foremost engaged. So
Mm,
there was the boom of online things. Basically, they created like a bazillion of activities online to keep themselves engaged and feel that they didn't want to lose the community, right? So we felt that too, and we did our best not to close the business, but rather doing the opposite. So we didn't freeze the company, but we kept on fighting. And what we did was the team started doing consultancy because we were like skyrocketing in growth right before the pandemic, and everybody wanted my talents. With talents, I mean my people, right? So I was like, how am I
but
supposed not to lose
consultancy for
people?
what though? Consultancy for like for travel for because obviously travel wasn't doing well at that point. So like where were you consulting?
That we're amazing marketers and community makers.
Got you.
So
Got you.
all the marketing team, all the people working in community, all the people working on operations, we are like we literally started like innovating the whole industry, the whole way of launching and scaling an operational business, because that's a super intense an
Mm,
operational business. So the people we trained were amazing in helping other startup to grow and other startups to scale. So basically, we started like having our talents working for other companies, not losing talents, but rather have them engaged and having them challenged. Because at the end of the day, the worst thing that could happen for an ambitious person working for an ambitious company is not having ambitions anymore, right? So
yeah.
that was the biggest, let's say, threat that we had at the time, even more than closing the business, losing the people we onboarded and losing the community we created, right? Because otherwise, if we lost those two things, we would have lost value and credibility in the
Mm,
market, right? So this was one thing that we did. Then we went back to startup phase, let's say. That's a phase of business that I love. So we started launching new business within WeRoad, and we created an e-commerce of our own merchandise in 24 hours. And also what we did was like launching our own gift card website, and selling 500,000 revenues in 1 week during the pandemic. If I'm not wrong, it was April
what?
2020.
Well, that was just
Uh,
in merchandise and in gift cards.
it was mainly in gift cards, and I can tell you the reason why. And
Wow.
I was so so impressed about the result of it, because at the end of the day, what we did at the time was group travels between people that they don't know each other, right? All over the world, because we mainly operated Peru, Colombia, Costa Rica, Japan. So exactly the no-go list for a pandemic. So we came up with the idea of like, okay, let's do gift cards, right? Enabling people to buy a holiday without knowing when and where they can go. So basically, it was like, okay,
Mm,
that's the only thing we can try and understand if it works. And it actually worked so well. I thought in the
It's like
first
a
place that
mystery holiday.
yeah, I mean, the concept is that of the gift card. You can use it when and where for whatever destination you wanted,
Oh,
and
I got you. Yeah.
yeah, and so basically, we gave all the people that knew us at the time, the possibility to have a discounted holiday at the end of the day, as soon as the pandemic would have been like a bad memory, right? What happened was that we not only sold these gift cards to repeaters. That was my expectations, right? So people that have already traveled with us and stuff, but we were able to do acquisition with it. So I think 60% of
Mm.
the bookings, the purchased gift cards were coming from people that have never traveled with us. So that witnessed like the kind of impact we had in the last, I would say, couple of years
But
before the
like
pandemic.
Erica, why do you think people like the because like we talked about how strong your community was, but 60% of the people who've never sort of traveled with you, why do you think they bought gift cards? Like that's a very interesting question to ask, especially in the pandemic. Why do you think that was?
That was community, that word of mouth, because at the end of the day, before the pandemic, I think we had like around 20,000 travelers that travel with us, with an average score, I mean, the rating of our trips that was above 9 out of 10. And at the time we had around 400 travel coordinators in Italy and Spain. So those people, and I mean, our people love us, right, in the sense that they literally feel the community was central to their lives, or an accelerator to
Mm.
their lives, right? So what they've seen probably and experienced as we did during the pandemic was literally they saw their community threatened, right, in survival, right? So the whole thing was like, guys, I don't know, I just want to get out of this situation. As soon as I can get
Yeah.
out, I'll be doing it, because what I want right now is getting to know new people. I've been like locked in, alone or with like my probably flatmate. Hopefully you liked it, but so what they wanted after the pandemic was new people, new connections. So the
Mm.
need of connecting people, that was our reason for being in the very first place. After the pandemic, and in the, let's say, uh poses of the pandemic, was even harder and bigger, and I would say like fundamental to fight loneliness. And
Mm.
I mean, everybody knows the stories that like everybody went through during the pandemic, right? So
Yeah, of course, of
loneliness
course.
loneliness for all generations was a thing, but especially I think for Gen Zers and millennials, it was like bad,
Mm.
right? So we were there with the
I
right
find that phenomenal
fit.
though. I find that phenomenal how like you so in the pandemic you switched to I know consultancy, but you generated about 500,000 I guess like euros
Yeah.
from gift card sales because like but people didn't even know when they were going to use them because how strong your 60% of them were from like people that never travel with you, how strong your community was. I guess the last question before you wrap up is like what's the secret behind building such a strong community?
Well, actually, I think it's all built around values and a solid vision. And for us, community, vision, mission, things like that aren't buzzword or tick boxes in a startup like Canva, business model, whatever, but literally are the core to the reason why we stand. Okay, and
Mm.
we go ahead and we set our own ambitions. So for us, like literally having the vision of connecting people, cultures, and stories during the pandemic was like the light at the end of the tunnel kind of feeling, right? So we kept like fighting and going forward that direction steady, and the whole community followed, because I think they've never felt that we would have left them behind somehow, or that we would have give up, in any moment, but rather in any moment that it was possible to travel, to get back on the road, we did it. Becoming sort of wave makers in the market. We opened like
Mm.
tourist corridors to Canary Islands when it was possible to do so. We always said what we thought as a brand, so taking a stand
Yeah.
during the pandemic, fighting against prejudice, against everything. And so people see it very, very, I think, bluntly, and they trust us. And I think that's the
Mm.
secret recipe, just being like consistent and focused towards the reason why we're all here.
Amazing, Erica. That was such a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I can't wait to see what WeRoad does. Now that the
Thanks to you.
pandemic's more like over. So, how can people stay in touch with you and what you're doing? I've heard as well that you've launched in the UK now. I think yeah, you
Yes.
mentioned it. So, like, yeah, how can people stay in touch with you and what you're doing?
Yes, well, actually, first and foremost, follow us on Instagram. It's at WeRoad_travel. So there you can basically see all the things that we're doing. And as sharing is one of our values, right? You can basically see everything that happens behind the scenes and in the scenes all over the world.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Erica,
Thanks a
again.
million, Tina.
And yeah, I'll
Thanks.
speak to you very soon. Thank you again.
Thanks.